So I think we've got about 15 minutes. It's not long, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions that you've got, but we're going to have other Q&As as well after the other panel. So you can either ask the panel overall, or you can target a question at one specific speaker. So yeah, any questions? Hi.
Hello. They've all been fantastic talks. This is just a really quick one. Paul, you mentioned a very influential book, and I didn't quite get the reference of it. It was just earlier on. You said the title of a book that had been hugely influential to you.
Was it Fiesta?
I can't remember. It might not.
I've got them listed. I'll come and get you afterwards. Yeah.
Is it that one? Or and Creed.
Or
it
and Creed.
Or, no. It was,
No?
I think it was before the Or reference.
So the first one I gave was Fiesta.
Oh, okay.
Which is called What If Art Education Beyond Expression and Creativity. No,
And it's Fiesta.
because you're my brought that.
Thank you.
But again, I'll show you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the panel or individual speakers? I've got a question.
Yeah, you go first.
Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of questions raised, a lot of really great ideas. I was just wondering what the panel, have they got any ideas about how can we elevate drawing as an analytical, observational, critical and conceptual tool in art school? Any of the panel want to? It's a big question.
Yeah. I can have a go. I mean, I think it has to be foregrounded right at the beginning. I mean, I was trying to sort of suggest that it starts before they've even come to you. And I think it's not losing that momentum prior to, for example, entering an institution like this where it's really valued. So I think it's about the influence back down to school where that influence is disappearing. For me, that's key. So if we can mobilise more people to get into school, that would help that question.
Right.
I think that, you know, we don't anymore have students, for example, coming to institutions like this, my own, you know, anywhere else that is thinking that drawing is valuable, with what you might have once considered a portfolio, that doesn't exist anymore, or it largely doesn't exist.
So you specifically thinking about foundation level or A level?
I'm thinking about, you know, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2. And why is that not fascinating? And why wouldn't we be extending our arms back down to that level? It sounds kind of strange, but they are the artists of the future. And so we can't mitigate it somewhere higher up. We have to, I feel very strongly we have to keep that going. Right. And you can see even in some of the slides I showed you where they don't need a prompt, they just need some space to do that. You know, I know for my own children who have grown up at their university, but I know that they didn't do any art. Thinking, I can't even comprehend that.
They didn't choose that.
Didn't have the option. No
Right.
option
Okay.
at school. So, I mean, yeah.
Because I think I really support that. So I have children that draw, and it kind of really flourishes at that age, and you can see it in the sketchbook images and everything. But then I think it's lost in secondary education, actually.
Yeah.
I think there's with this emphasis on STEM without, you know, the A of STEAM, I think it just kind of gets taken away, and there's more emphasis on the articulation through text, isn't there? But there's so many people that are dyslexic and struggle with that, and even schools aren't supporting verbal articulation and recording, writing. You know, they're just kind of very traditional in the way that you maybe do drawing when you're young, and then you learn to write when you're older. And I think, you know, it's an outdated mode, isn't it? I think we need to be looking, as you've suggested, at all these other exciting forms of visual communication to help us learn. And I think that's what we need within the secondary education system, and applaud, you know, developing drawing as a fundamental start to that, but in a much more expanded view than just the pencil.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I
was going to say, because I teach on the integrated foundation at UWE, and it's quite interesting, and I think it does stem from kind of school experience where students are terrified of drawing. You know, so I guess this is where a lot of my kind of ideas for my research came from, the fact that they kind of, they don't, you know, we sometimes can't use the term drawing, we're having to say kind of make and observe, you know, as a way of kind of coaxing them to,
I agree. I think it just really helps if you really take care to articulate an expanded view of what drawing is. And you know, the thing about representation and the sort of Rembrandt model, if you remove that, it's very, very liberating, because then everyone can see actually we're using it in many, many different ways. And I think think if people could articulate that early on in schools, then everyone would be much more comfortable with continuing to draw and drawing through art school and beyond. That it's continued to be used, but it doesn't necessarily have to just fit the fine art model. I think there are many quotes from designers who say it's continually useful to them. So I sort of felt when I was looking for it, I found it in abundance, but it was not articulated properly. And so I think we've got a duty to try and articulate it, and then we actually know it's being used in all these different ways.
Okay, great. That lady.
I just wanted to share an interesting experience I had recently, because when I was at school, if you can imagine, drawing was all about objective drawing and calling what you saw, apparently. And recently I went to give a talk as a secondary school, in fact the secondary school I used to go to when I was a child. And I was there for the day, and I was very interested to see that the drawing was completely different from what I was doing when I was at school. It was all about, in inverted commas, imagination. Now, in theory, that sounds interesting and liberating, but when I actually looked at the students' drawings, what I'm afraid I saw were kind of caricatures of, like, comics and sort of Disney characters and things that you could kind of think, yes, it's imagination, but what struck me was that actually it wasn't imagination. It was something that came from something they'd seen, but not in the real world. And I mean, I'm an artist, and I use drawing in lots of different ways. And one of the things that I think is so important about observational drawing is not that it's necessarily important to be able to draw something accurately, but that it tells you, I think some of the speakers were talking about, it tells you and shows you and enables you to go through a process to understand how things work. In something, for example, in my work, I work with processes in nature, but I'm not, I have recorded the processes accurately, but what I evolve from that is an understanding of the processes, and that process is then what the drawing is about.
Okay.
And what I saw in that school actually rather took me aback, because they had quite a good art sort of area. They didn't not have it. It wasn't something that had been taken out or discarded. But I felt that something had been lost in not making the connection between observation and creating, because you actually have to feed your creativity through observation, and then through that, I find, having worked with students at a higher level, you then work through yourself to get something which is new for you out in the world, but you can't do that without the food. The food is what you see and what you record and what you learn,
Okay.
and that has to come out in the expression. But that was missing, I felt, in that school education, because imagination was the focus.
Thanks. That's interesting. Lucy.
Hello. Well, I've kind of got a broader question, but from given what you said, maybe there's a kind of part B to it. So we're thinking here, we've started considering the idea of putting together a manifesto for drawing, sort of starting with courses across our departments, and then thinking perhaps we'll try and come up with a manifesto for the whole place. So I wonder what your thoughts are about that, whether you've done that. Oh yeah, we're considering a manifesto for drawing here, perhaps across, starting with courses, but then perhaps a broader one. I wonder if something exists I know Chloe, you're here, but I wonder if something like that exists where you are, or anybody else has something like that they have in place, or whether you think that's, I don't know, so given what you said, I wonder whether we need to think about a manifesto that kind of looks backwards not backwards, but looks kind of to the people coming into us from their education, as well as kind of forwards in what we want to do.
A manifesto for our education, but going right back. To the
Yeah, I mean,
grassroots in a way.
I guess that's it. Like thinking about what we would like people to have experienced before they come here, and we could, I don't know where that would fit in later, but certainly we're thinking about having one for our kind of ideas here. I wonder, does one exist where you are? or maybe it's just in your head.
Sort of trade secret there, isn't it?
Yeah. You don't have to tell us what it is.
No. I think if I can just rewind a bit. I mean, I'm glad I got through my presentation. I missed out my punchline.
Okay, yeah.
But one of the things I wanted to say at the end was I think it's about reclaiming drawing as an insubordinate and a radical proposition, and not something that is conformist and therefore I wrote and talked to the test. Okay, sorry, I'll start again. I was thinking that probably drawing, I could stand up, but I'm now sitting down. I'm going to stay sitting down.
It's not well.
Okay? Sorry, but I'll put my hand up. I think for me it's about claiming drawing as an insubordinate act, a non-conformer, a challenger, something that's about being radical, as in the proper ground-up idea of what radical means. And so if you think of that in terms of an age range, that's the radicalness of drawing all the way through. That it's endemic, that you can't do anything without that as a premise. It doesn't, however, fix it to one typology. There are thousands of them, and they're all equally valued. But I think it's about it being radical. If we're talking about a manifesto, that's what I want to see, whether it's yours, mine, any of ours actually. That's how I think you have a groundswell. It's like a campaign. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know we have a campaign for drawing group, don't we? There's one in the ether. But that sort of language is very, very powerful. And I think then everybody can feel, kind of enfranchised in some way.
Just an observation at our secondary school level, I've noticed in my short sort of experience of secondary school education that a lot of heads of department of art courses within secondary school are from a photography background or a graphic design background, and they're kind of pushing an agenda which might be quite progressive but not necessarily within drawing. And traditionally, I guess, course leaders of secondary school art courses would have been from a fine art or more of a drawing background, traditional drawing background, and maybe that's having some impact on drawing when we get to see them. You got any time?
Can I have one last thing though? I think the other thing I would have said to you is that it's about slowing the world down.
Okay, yeah.
And so I know, just taking your point about different kind of disciplines, perhaps the biggest drawers that I can see at the moment in where I work are not fine art students at all. They're actually games students who are using it as a tool to slow down their entirely accelerated digital world. Drawing provides a very distinct another space for them. So that's kind of useful and amazing, actually.
And that was really beneficial, actually, in the manifesto meeting we had, where there was staff from other areas. There was that kind of transparency, wasn't there? So I think sometimes we can be a bit isolated, can't we, in our kind of drawing-focused areas.
Yeah.
But actually,
I think Tom's actually been collating all those manifestos from the different courses. Have we got a chance for any more questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
Hello. Thank you for giving me the word. It's very interesting everything what you're talking about drawing, and I was very interested in the taxonomy and the taxonomy of learning and drawing. I wonder if maybe we are thinking too small in terms of drawing within the art school, because, for example, I have been teaching the business school, and here with my colleague we have been using some art-based methodologies, and drawing is one of those that we have been using. And so my question perhaps for the panel, for you is, and to what extent we can actually democratize drawing, not only for artists, but other disciplines, scientists, business people, I don't know, lawyers, etc. Have you have any evidence or experience about it?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think it's also strange that artists and designers are thought to be creative when actually creativity is much, much broader than that. And so one example is I know that Einstein, when he was trying to figure out the theory of relativity, he actually he kind of abandoned traditional mathematics. He was working in a patent office in Switzerland, I think, because he needed to do something quite banal to rethink in this incredibly expansive, sophisticated way, but he abandoned traditional models of mathematics and actually just started doing a lot of drawing and sort of drawn diagrams. And often if you see sort of interesting photographs of scientists, you'll see them with an amazing kind of blackboard behind them. So I totally agree, and I think let's get away from this sort of this kind of fine art dominance and this artistic model, and it's a fantastic way for human beings to express their thoughts and to see things more clearly and to put things together in new ways. So
I think if we are preaching to the convert, it would have been good to have invited some builders or.
Yeah.
But internationally, they do it too. Don't they? I have a friend who's just come back from a research project in India, and it's a business research project where actually all of the students on the business course did a huge element of drawing, and life drawing, observational drawing. So it's quite interesting. It could be quite interesting to look at how other kind of countries approach it.
Just to go back to you, the first part of your question. I mean, I unashamedly position my talk from a fine art perspective on an artist, so maybe that's natural. But I have just been, I think, Andrew, well, just met you for the first time, but I'm editing the next Drawing Research Theory and Practice journal, which is a starring role for Andrew, and I think Howard Riley, wherever he is, first time I met him, but read him a lot. Where are you, Howard? I think he's going to be the next one. Thank you. But what came out of that journal, which is about drawing learning, hence the talk, was a really interesting article from an Australian academic who had been positioning drawing as a central tool in a medical school. And what was happening in the medical school, it was actually a school of dentistry, my mistake, and you can read all about it in December when it comes out. But they were using drawing to teach fine motor skills for surgical application, and there's some really brilliant data that's come out of that to show and demonstrate through data, not just speculation, that the students who are undertaking regular observational drawing, and they were basically drawing teeth, but in very fine detail, did much better in their examinations for dental surgery. So it was a very powerful kind of cross-fertilisation of what drawing is useful for. And I completely agree that it's a cross-platform. I think we speak from our own sort of silo, but it just crosses everything.
That's interesting. Slate.
I'm Australian and I come from a medical family. But, it seems like you're talking about things that I think what I'm wanting to say is about what you're saying, but I'm just wanting to sort of take it that step further. And can we be talking about drawing as a way of self expression to oneself? So it's this dialogue that you have with yourself, and that as being actually fundamental to wellness, and that how can you have a relationship with anyone if you don't have a good relationship with yourself? So I'm just wondering where you sort of feel that factors into all this.
I sort of talked a little bit about it with Gita Hazia's work, and no, I don't know if Fran did you do our workshop in the summer at Loughborough?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean so we just ran a little workshop, sort of really sort of physical embodied drawing, and I actually joined the workshop. I helped design it, but I joined it, and it was really fantastic, and we were like drawing a couple together as people, and we avoided any kind of figurative representation, and we sort of built up this almost like, an alphabet of emotions and movements through using the human body. And I think that you should look up Bagita's article, because it's obviously becoming a valuable tool in the university where I work to support mental health and well-being amongst the student and staff community, actually. So I think there's a lot of work in that area that's gathering pace.
Interesting. Did you have a question?
It could be putting you on the spot a bit, but you've talked a lot about the value of drawing in education.
Could you speak up, please?
Sorry, yeah. we've heard a lot about the value of drawing in education from a young age up to art school. Have any of you actually considered the value, or do you have an idea of the value of drawing for those with visual impairment and blind? I mean, there is a technique within sort of art schools of blind drawing, and that is actually quite interesting, because if you're actually blind, that's how you draw. So, do you have any ideas of, or any experience with visual impairment and drawing?
Yeah.
I mean, by happenstance, I did work with some people in Loughborough quite a few years ago who were very visually impaired, and we, I think the Royal National Institute for the Blind is up there, and they brought some students for us to work with, and they also brought these amazing glasses where it replicated different eye conditions, and we put them on for half an hour and tried to manoeuvre around a space where people were drilling. It was really industrial, it was really challenging, and of course, what was unfair was we could take the glasses off, but the students couldn't. But then we got them, just simple things like we've got some money plants, the colour of different leaves and stuff, and the students felt them, and then they were drawing what they were describing, and it was a really powerful tool for them to articulate, a tactile sort of process into a sort of visual process. I felt like it could have gone a lot further, and I think they really enjoyed it as well. So yeah, and I think you're right, it should be looked at more and thought about more.
I think we're running out of time, but I'm sure those questions might be carried forward to some of the issues or questions raised for the next panel. That's great. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.